That's my seat.
Sir, we need to check your ticket. Please move to another seat.
No.
You have to move to economy class, otherwise you will be asked to leave the plane.
I want your full names.
Cancel the $500 million contract with this airline. Sign with their competitor tonight.
They looked down on him and forced him out of first class. But they never expected that moments later, the very person they had removed would be the one who could determine their fate. Before we begin the story, let us know where you're watching from. Sir, you need to step out of that line. First class boarding isn't for you. The sentence landed clean, cold, practiced. People nearby turned their heads, but only halfway. Just enough to watch. Not enough to get involved. Rain hammered against the glass walls of Terminal 4 at JFK, the kind of steady New York rain that makes everything feel heavier, slower, more tense. And right there, under the white overhead lights, a man in a faded gray hoodie stood still. Ethan Cole did not move. He didn't argue. He didn't frown. He simply looked at the gate agent. Melissa Grant stood behind the counter, posture straight, lips pressed into a thin professional smile. Early 30s, hair pulled tight. The kind of employee who believed she could read people in a second. Her eyes moved over him again. Hoodie, jeans, sneakers, wrong category. Behind Ethan, a man in a navy suit shifted impatiently, rolling his suitcase forward an inch. "Come on," he muttered under his breath. "We're holding up the line." Another woman leaned toward her husband. "He's probably confused," she whispered, not as quietly as she thought. Ethan heard all of it. He had heard versions of it his entire life. Still, his voice, when it came, was calm. Even. Controlled. "I'm in first class." Melissa's smile didn't break, but it tightened. "This lane is for confirmed first-class passengers and Diamond members, sir," she said, tapping the scanner lightly. "Economy boarding will begin in about 20 minutes. She didn't say you don't belong. She didn't have to." Ethan slowly raised his phone. No sudden movements, no attitude, just a quiet gesture. "Go ahead," he said. Melissa hesitated for half a second, then leaned forward, scanning the digital pass with a quick, almost dismissive motion. Beep, bright, clear, too clear. Her eyes flicked to the screen. And for a fraction of a second, something slipped. Seat 1A. Ethan Cole, Diamond VIP. That was the seat. The seat, front of the aircraft, private suite, highest tier. Her fingers froze around the scanner. The man behind Ethan leaned slightly to see. "What does it say?" he asked, curiosity cutting through irritation. Melissa straightened quickly, composure snapping back into place. "You are cleared to board," she said. No apology, no correction, just a small step to the side. Ethan held her gaze for a second longer than necessary. Not aggressive, not soft either. Measured. Then he walked forward. The jet bridge swallowed him in silence. Behind him, the line started moving again. "Probably used miles," someone said. "Or a last-minute upgrade," another voice added. People always needed an explanation, something that made the world feel balanced again. Ethan didn't hear them anymore. Inside the aircraft, the air changed. Warmer, quieter, controlled, soft lighting, cream leather. The faint scent of citrus and polished wood. First class. A flight attendant greeted him with a practiced smile. "Welcome aboard." Ethan nodded once, kept walking. Seat 1A. He placed his bag down. Sat, exhaled slowly. From the outside, he looked like a man settling in for a routine overnight flight. But inside, something else moved. Not anger, not yet. Something colder, more precise. A memory, a dozen rooms, 100 meetings. 1,000 moments where people had looked at him and made the same quick calculation. Too casual, too quiet, too something. He had learned early. You don't fight every battle out loud. Some you win later. He leaned back, closed his eyes for a second. Outside, rain streaked across the window like blurred lines of ink. Inside, the cabin filled, muted voices, soft laughter, the click of overhead bins. Across the aisle, a man in a tailored suit adjusted his cufflinks, glancing briefly at Ethan. Just a glance. Just long enough to register, then look away. A couple in row 2 spoke in low voices about real estate in Connecticut. Their tone carried the easy confidence of people who had never been questioned about where they belonged. Up front, a flight attendant poured sparkling water into a glass. The world had already sorted itself. Or at least it thought it had. Ethan opened his eyes again, pulled out his tablet. Quarterly reports. Numbers didn't judge. Numbers told the truth. And right now, those numbers mattered more than anything happening in this cabin. Atlas Dynamics was closing a deal in London, a major one, the kind that reshaped entire supply chains, the kind that moved markets. He scrolled. Margins, logistics timelines, infrastructure costs, every line clean, controlled, every decision calculated. Outside, thunder rolled low in the distance. Inside, the plane felt like a sealed world, a bubble of privilege floating above consequence. But that illusion only held as long as nobody pushed it. 10 minutes passed. Boarding continued. Then the tone changed. It started as a voice. Loud.
Sharp. What do you mean it's taken?
Heads turned. Ethan didn't look up yet. He didn't need to. The voice carried something familiar, not just irritation, expectation. The kind that comes from a lifetime of being accommodated. Footsteps followed. Fast. Heavy. A man appeared at the entrance of the cabin. Richard Sterling. Early 50s. Broad shoulders. Expensive suit that fit just right. The kind of fit that didn't come off a rack. Gold watch catching the light. His jaw was tight. His eyes scanning, then stopping. On seat 1A, on Ethan, there was a pause, a small one, but it stretched. Richard's expression shifted. Confusion first, then recognition, not of who Ethan was, but of what he thought he was seeing. And it didn't match the picture in his head. He turned slightly, looked back toward the front. Cynthia, he called, voice rising again.
We need to fix this now.
Ethan finally looked up, slowly. Their eyes met for just a second, and in that second, something passed between them, not words, not yet. But a line had been drawn, one man certain the world would bend, the other knowing exactly how much force it would take to break it. Richard Sterling did not sit down. He stayed in the aisle, one hand gripping the back of the seat in front of him, the other holding his boarding pass like evidence in a trial he was certain he would win. This is seat 1A, he said, slower now, each word pressed flat. I've been flying this route for years. This is always my seat. The flight attendant near the gala shifted uncomfortably. A younger man, maybe late 20s, glanced toward the front, then back at his tablet, pretending not to notice. Cynthia Maddox appeared seconds later, breath slightly uneven from walking fast down the jet bridge. Her posture straightened the moment she stepped into the cabin. Mr. Sterling, she said, voice soft, almost apologetic. I understand there's a concern. There's more than a concern, Richard snapped.
There's a mistake.
He pointed, not at the seat, at Ethan. You've got someone in my seat. The word someone hung in the air like something unfinished. Cynthia followed his finger. Her eyes landed on Ethan again. This time she knew exactly who he was, or at least what his ticket said. Still, something in her expression tightened, a hesitation. Not about the facts. About the choice. Ethan closed his tablet, slowly, placed it on the side console. He didn't stand, didn't rush. He looked at Cynthia first, then at Richard, then back at Cynthia. Is there a problem? He asked. His voice was low, steady. It carried. Richard let out a short laugh, sharp, disbelieving. Yes, there's a problem. That's my seat. Ethan didn't respond right away. He let the silence stretch. Just long enough to make people shift in their seats. Just long enough to make the moment heavier. I don't think it is, he said finally.
Simple.
Direct. Cynthia stepped forward, hands clasped lightly in front of her. Sir, she said, this time addressing Ethan, may I see your boarding pass again? There was a slight change in her tone.
Less polite, more official.
Ethan noticed. So did the woman across the aisle who subtly lowered her magazine, eyes peeking over the edge. You scanned it at the gate, Ethan said. I understand, Cynthia replied quickly. We just need to verify something. Need, not want, not request. Need. Ethan held her gaze, then reached for his phone, unlocked it, turned the screen toward her. No sudden movements, no attitude, just compliance. Cynthia leaned in, closer than necessary. The scanner wasn't even in her hand this time. She read it directly. Seats 1A, name confirmed. Status confirmed. Everything clean, everything correct. Behind her, Richard shifted his weight, impatience rising. Well, he pressed. Cynthia straightened. For a second, she said nothing. And in that second, the entire cabin seemed to lean forward without moving. It does show seat 1A, she said finally. Quiet, controlled, but not firm, not final. Richard's jaw tightened. Then your system is wrong, he said immediately. Or someone messed up. He looked at Ethan again, longer this time, taking him in. The hoodie now folded beside the seat. The plain black shirt, the calm posture, no visible markers of status, nothing that matched the price of that seat, nothing that fit his understanding of how the world worked. Look, Richard continued, voice lowering but growing sharper. I paid full fare for that seat. I didn't use points. I didn't upgrade. I booked it early. I need that seat. Need, the word again. Ethan leaned back slightly, one arm resting on the armrest, relaxed, but not passive. And I didn't? He asked. The question landed softly, but it cut. Richard blinked once, just once, then scoffed. That's not the point. Ethan's eyes didn't leave his. It usually is. A man 2 rows back coughed quietly, trying to cover a reaction he didn't want to show. Cynthia shifted again. The pressure was building, not loud, but heavy. The kind of pressure that doesn't come from noise. It comes from attention, from eyes, from the awareness that every decision now is being watched. Mr. Sterling, Cynthia said, turning slightly toward him, there may have been a last-minute adjustment. We can offer you seat 1B or 2A. Both are comparable. The word didn't land well. Richard's expression hardened. I don't want comparable, he said. I want what I booked. His voice rose slightly, enough to carry further down the cabin, enough for more heads to turn. I have business partners sitting nearby. I need that seat. He turned back to Cynthia. Not Ethan. Never Ethan. Fix it. One word. Flat. Commanding. Cynthia inhaled slowly, held it, then exhaled, and in that breath, something shifted, a decision forming, not based on policy, not based on truth, based on pressure, based on perception, based who looked like they mattered more. She turned back to Ethan, her expression changed, subtle, but clear. Sir, she said, tone firmer now, we're going to need you to move. The words dropped clean, no hesitation this time, no softness. Across the aisle, the woman with the magazine lowered it completely. Someone in the back whispered, no way. Ethan didn't react immediately. He didn't argue, didn't raise his voice. He just looked at her. Long, steady. The kind of look that makes people second guess themselves.
Why?
He asked. One word, calm, direct. Cynthia's lips pressed together. There's been a seating issue, she said. We need to accommodate another passenger. Another passenger, not a name. Not a reason, just a category. Ethan nodded once, slow, as if processing something deeper than the words. I booked this seat 3 months ago, he said. I selected it. I paid for it. His voice didn't rise, but it carried weight. I understand, Cynthia replied quickly, but there was an edge now. We'll move you to another first-class seat. Ethan's head tilted slightly. And if I don't move? The question was quiet, but it changed everything. Cynthia hesitated. Just a fraction, then steadied herself. If you refuse to comply with crew instructions, we may have to involve security. The word security echoed, not loud, but sharp, like a line being crossed. A man near the window shifted in his seat. Another passenger pulled out his phone, holding it low, angle careful. Richard smiled, not wide, not obvious, but enough. Ethan saw it. He saw all of it, the look, the posture, the assumption. And something inside him settled, not anger, not yet, something colder, clearer. He reached forward, picked up his tablet, slid it into his bag, slow, deliberate, every movement controlled. Then he stood. The cabin went quiet, completely quiet, no clinking glasses, no soft conversations, just the low hum of the aircraft systems. Ethan stepped into the aisle. He was taller than Richard had expected, broader too, not imposing, but solid, grounded. He looked at Cynthia, then at Richard, then back at Cynthia. I want your full name, he said. Cynthia blinked, caught off guard. My name? And your employee ID. The request was calm but precise, professional, almost formal. Cynthia hesitated. Cynthia Maddox, she said finally. Employee ID 88314. Ethan nodded once, memorizing, then turned to Richard. And yours? Richard frowned. What? Your name? There was a pause. Then, almost reluctantly, Richard Sterling. Ethan nodded again. No reaction, no comment. Just information. He adjusted the strap of his bag on his shoulder, then looked at Cynthia one last time. I'm not moving to another seat, he said. I'm leaving the plane. That caught her off guard.
You're leaving?
Yes. Simple final. He turned, walked toward the front, no rush, no hesitation. Behind him, Richard stepped forward, already reaching for the seat, claiming it as if the outcome had always been inevitable. Cynthia stood frozen for a second, then followed Ethan toward the door. Sir, if you leave, we may not be able to rebook you on this flight, she said quickly. Ethan didn't stop. That won't be necessary. The words echoed down the narrow aisle. Soft, but absolute. And somewhere, deep in the structure of things that none of them could yet see, a decision had just been made, one that would not stay inside this cabin. The jet bridge door closed behind him with a dull metal click. The sound stayed. It echoed longer than it should have. Ethan Cole didn't stop walking. The narrow tunnel stretched ahead, fluorescent lights buzzing faintly overhead. His footsteps were steady, even, no hesitation, no rush. Behind him, the cabin door sealed. A different world now. One that believed the situation was over. It wasn't. He stepped back into the terminal. The noise returned all at once. Rolling suitcases, boarding announcements, conversations layered over each other. Life moving forward like nothing had happened. But something had. Ethan slowed near the glass wall overlooking the runway. Rain still falling, thick, heavy, unforgiving. A Meridian Airways aircraft sat at the gate, lights blinking against the gray sky. Ground crew moved around it with practiced efficiency. Inside that plane, a man was settling into seat 1A. Inside that plane, a crew believed they had solved a problem. Ethan slipped a hand into his pocket, pulled out his phone. For a moment, he didn't unlock it. He just stood there, watching the plane, breathing slow, measured. Not anger, not frustration, something sharper, clarity. He had seen this before. Different rooms, different faces, same pattern. A decision made quickly, based on appearance, based on assumption. And every time, the same quiet calculation followed. Is it worth the fight? Most people walked away because the cost of fighting felt too high, because the system felt too big, because dignity in those moments seemed negotiable. Ethan unlocked his phone, scrolled. Names moved past his thumb. Investors, senators, CEOs, people who returned his calls within seconds. He stopped on one name. David Carter, Chief Operating Officer, Atlas Dynamics. He tapped. The line rang once, twice, then clicked. Ethan? David's voice came through, steady but surprised. Thought you were boarding. I was. A pause. Something in Ethan's tone registered. What happened? Ethan looked back at the aircraft. They removed me from my seat. Silence. Not confusion. Not disbelief. Silence that understood weight. David didn't speak for a full second. Then, quiet, controlled. Tell me exactly what happened. Ethan didn't rush. He didn't dramatize. He stated facts. Gate interaction. Cabin confrontation. Names. Words used. Tone. The threat. Every detail clean. Precise. On the other end, David's breathing changed. Slower. Heavier. They knew who you were, David asked.
No.
And if they had, Ethan's eyes stayed on the plane. They would behave differently. Another pause. Longer this time. That's the problem, David said finally. Ethan didn't answer. He didn't need to. Both men understood. The issue wasn't the seat. It never was. It was the system that allowed that decision to feel normal. Allowed it to happen without hesitation. Allowed it to happen to anyone who didn't look like they belonged. David spoke again. What do you want to do? The question wasn't emotional. It wasn't reactive. It was operational. Ethan shifted his weight slightly. Rain streaked down the glass in uneven lines. Inside the aircraft, movement began. The jet bridge slowly pulled away. They made a choice, Ethan said. Yes, They had the information, yes, and they still made it. David exhaled quietly. Then we respond. Ethan finally looked away from the plane. His gaze moved across the terminal. People walking, talking, waiting, ordinary lives, ordinary people. Most of them would never have a call like this to make, would never have leverage, would never be able to push back. That thought settled heavier than anything else. That contract, Ethan said. David didn't need clarification. Meridian, yes. $500 million. Annual travel agreement. Flights, cargo, logistics. A deal that anchored Meridian's quarterly projections. A deal already negotiated. Ready for signature. We're scheduled to finalize Friday, David said carefully. Ethan nodded, even though David couldn't see it. Cancel it. No hesitation. No raised voice. Just a decision. On the other end, David didn't react immediately. He knew what that meant. Not just financially, strategically, publicly. You're sure? He asked. Yes, once we pull, they're exposed. I know. Their stock. I know. Silence again. But this time it carried something else. Alignment. What's the reason? David asked. Ethan's eyes narrowed slightly. Corporate values, he said. Customer treatment. David let out a breath that almost sounded like a laugh. Not humor. Recognition. That'll hit hard. It should. The aircraft began to move, slowly pushing back from the gate. Lights blinking through the rain. Inside, people were settling in, drinks being served, seats adjusted, a normal flight on the surface. Draft the statement, Ethan continued. Tonight. David didn't hesitate anymore. I'll get legal on it. And David, yes, make it clean. Understood. No threats, no accusations, just facts, the kind that land harder than any argument. Ethan ended the call, lowered the phone. The plane turned toward the taxiway, engines humming louder now, power building. For a moment he watched it, really watched it. Because inside that metal shell was a man who believed he had won. Inside that system was a company that believed this was routine. And for years, maybe it had been. Decisions made quietly. People moved around. No consequences. But systems don't change until something breaks them. Ethan turned away from the window, walked back into the flow of the terminal. No one looked at him twice. No one knew what had just been set in motion. And that was the point. Power didn't always announce itself. Sometimes it moved quietly. Signed papers, made calls, shifted numbers. And by the time anyone noticed, it was already done. Behind him, the aircraft rolled toward the runway. Ahead of him, something much larger had already begun. The aircraft lifted through the rain without hesitation. Inside the cabin, the noise softened. Engines steady, lights dimmed. Conversations resumed, as if nothing had happened. Richard Sterling adjusted his seat, leaning back into the leather with a slow exhale. A glass of champagne sat in his hand now, bubbles rising, smooth, familiar, control restored. He glanced once at the empty aisle where Ethan had stood minutes earlier, then looked away. The moment was already fading in his mind, replaced by emails, meetings, numbers. That was how his world worked. Problems appeared. He pushed. They moved. Simple. Across the aisle, a man in his late 60s watched him quietly over the top of a folded newspaper. He had said nothing during the confrontation, but he had seen everything, the way Ethan had spoken, the way the crew had shifted, the way the decision had been made. He shook his head once, barely noticeable, then lowered his eyes again. Further down the cabin, Cynthia Maddox stood near the galley, hands clasped, shoulders tight. The adrenaline was still there, fading, but not gone. She replayed the moment in her head. The look Ethan had given her, not angry, not defeated, something else, something she couldn't quite place. Everything okay? A fellow attendant asked quietly, stepping beside her. Cynthia forced a small smile. Yeah, just a seating issue. The other attendant nodded, used to the phrase. It meant nothing. It explained everything. Passenger move? He asked. Yes, good. Last thing we need is a delay. Cynthia nodded. Yes, a delay would have been worse. A complaint could be handled, a scene could be written off. But delays hit numbers. Numbers mattered. She took a breath, smoothed her uniform, and pushed the moment down, where inconvenient things go. At the front of the cabin, the captain's voice came over the intercom, calm and steady, announcing cruising altitude. Passengers relaxed. Seatbelts loosened, drinks refreshed. Normal, completely normal, except it wasn't. Miles below, New York disappeared into cloud, and somewhere in Manhattan, lights were still on. Phones were ringing, decisions were moving. At a glass office overlooking the city, David Carter stood by the window, jacket off, tie loosened. His phone was pressed to his ear. "Yes," he said, voice low but sharp. "We need the statement ready within the hour." Across the room, two members of the legal team sat at a long table, laptops open, typing fast. One of them looked up. "'Cause for termination?" she asked. David turned slightly. "Corporate values misalignment," he said. "Documented incident. Customer dignity." She nodded, typed, fast, precise. No emotion, just language that would hold, language that would land. Another voice came through the speaker on the desk. "What about media timing?" David glanced at the clock. "Late evening, but not too late." "Release before market open," he said. "Early. Pre-market?" "Yes." A pause. "That's aggressive." David didn't react, so was the decision they made. Silence on the line, then understood. The call ended. David set the phone down slowly. He looked back out at the city. This wasn't about revenge. Not to him. This was about structure. A system had revealed itself, and now it would be corrected. Across the Atlantic, hours passed. Flight time moved quietly. Dinner service. Lights dimmed further. Sleep settled over the cabin. Richard Sterling lay flat in seat 1A, blanket pulled up, eyes closed. At peace. Or something close to it. His breathing slow, even, unaware. Back in New York, the rain had stopped. The air felt different, clearer, but colder. At exactly 8 in the morning, Eastern Time, the statement went live. No headlines, no emotion, just words. Atlas Dynamics announces immediate termination of all corporate travel agreements with Meridian Airways, citing irreconcilable differences in corporate values and customer treatment. It hit the wires. Fast, clean, irreversible. Within minutes, it was picked up, first by financial terminals, then by news outlets, then by everything else. At Meridian Airways headquarters in Chicago, the executive floor was already active. Early meetings, coffee cups, routine, until it wasn't. The door to the CEO's office opened without a knock. "William," a voice said tight, urgent. William Carter looked up from his desk. Mid-50s, sharp suit, controlled demeanor, until now. "What is it?" he asked. A printed sheet hit the desk, hard. He frowned, picked it up. "Read the first line, then the second." Then again, slower, careful, as if reading it differently might change it. It didn't.
What is this?
He asked. But he already knew. The CFO stepped forward, voice strained. "It's real." William stood, slowly. "Call them," he said. "Now. We've been trying. Try harder." They're not responding. The room tightened, energy shifted. This wasn't a complaint. This wasn't a refund. This was something else. "Find out what happened," William said, voice rising just slightly. The head of operations stepped in, tablet in hand. "We pulled the flight logs," she said. "There was an incident last night." First class. William's eyes locked onto hers. "What kind of incident?" She hesitated, just enough to make it worse. A passenger was removed from a seat, downgraded. William frowned. "That happens." "Not like this." She turned the tablet, showed him name, seat, status. His face changed, not dramatically, but enough. "Who approved it?" he asked. "Gate agent." "Supervisor. And the passenger?" She paused again, then said it. "Ethan Cole." The name hung in the room, heavy, recognizable. The CFO exhaled slowly. "That Ethan Cole?"
Yes.
No one spoke, because everyone understood. Atlas Dynamics wasn't just a client. It was an anchor. Revenue, stability, confidence. And now it was gone, because someone made a decision, quick, easy, based on what they saw, not what was true. William set the tablet down, carefully, too carefully. "Get me everything," he said. "Names, reports, timeline." His voice was different now, colder, focused, and find out where he is. Back in the air, the plane began its descent. Soft announcements, seatbacks upright, windows opening, morning light breaking through clouds. Richard Sterling stirred, woke slowly, refreshed. The kind of sleep that comes easy when nothing is weighing on you. A flight attendant smiled. Good morning, Mr. Sterling. He nodded, stretched, reached for his phone, turned it on. Notifications flooded in, emails, messages, alerts. He frowned slightly, scrolled, then stopped. His expression shifted, just a little. A headline, short, direct. Atlas Dynamics terminates Meridian agreement. He read it again. Then again. The words didn't change. His grip tightened slightly on the phone. A small crack, barely visible, but real. And somewhere, far beyond that cabin, beyond that morning light, beyond the illusion of control, consequences were already in motion. Richard Sterling stared at the screen longer than he needed to. The words didn't move. They didn't soften. They didn't leave room for interpretation. Atlas Dynamics terminates Meridian agreement. His thumb hovered over the email notification beneath it. Subject line short. Direct. Internal briefing. He opened it, read fast, then slower, then stopped halfway through. The cabin around him was waking up. Seatbelts clicked. Overhead bins opened. Soft voices returned. But Richard didn't hear any of it. His jaw tightened. Not panic. Not yet. But something close. Across the aisle, the older man with the newspaper was watching again. This time openly. He had seen that look before. Men like Richard rarely questioned the system until the system shifted under them. Richard scrolled further. $500 million. Immediate termination. Effective immediately. No negotiation. No transition period. That was unusual. That was not how these things were handled. Deals this size didn't disappear overnight, unless something serious had happened. His mind moved quickly. What triggered it? Who made the call? Why now? And then, like a slow piece clicking into place, the memory surfaced. The hoodie, the calm voice, the man who didn't argue, the man who walked away. Richard's grip on the phone tightened, just slightly. Not enough for anyone else to notice, but enough. He looked toward the front of the cabin, toward seat 1A, his seat, now his again. But it didn't feel the same, not anymore. The flight attendant approached with a polite smile. Would you like some coffee before landing, Mr. Sterling? He blinked once, refocused. Yes, he said. His voice was steady, controlled. He had spent a lifetime learning that skill. Never show uncertainty, never show doubt. The attendant poured the coffee. Steam rose slowly. He didn't touch it. His attention was back on the screen. Another notification, financial alert. Meridian Airways pre-market down. He opened it. Numbers moved. Red. Falling. Fast. He leaned back slightly. Exhaled through his nose. Still controlled. But now, something else had entered the room. Wait. The plane touched down minutes later. A smooth landing. Applause scattered lightly through the cabin. Routine. Normal. But nothing felt normal anymore. As passengers stood, gathering their belongings, Richard stayed seated for a moment longer, thinking, calculating. He had a meeting, a critical one, in London, a deal that mattered, a deal that could stabilize his company's position. He couldn't afford distraction. He stood, straightened his jacket, picked up his bag, and stepped into the aisle as if nothing had changed. But it had. At Meridian headquarters, the situation had escalated. Phones didn't stop ringing. Assistants moved faster, voices sharper, controlled panic. William Carter stood in the center of it, not shouting, not pacing, still. But the stillness carried pressure. Where are we on damage assessment, he asked. The CFO didn't look up from his tablet. Stock down 12% pre-market, he said. Projected to drop further at open. William nodded once. What about other contracts? A pause. Then, we're getting inquiries. That wasn't good. Inquiries meant concern. Concern meant risk. Risk spread. Fast. William turned. Have we reached Cole? No response. Keep trying. The head of communications stepped in. Media is picking up the story, she said. They're focusing on the wording. Customer dignity. William's eyes narrowed slightly. What exactly happened on that flight? Silence. Then the operations director spoke. Initial report says a seating reassignment, first class. That doesn't cause this, William said. No. Then what does? Another pause. Longer. He was downgraded, she said. William looked at her. Direct. Unblinking. Explain. She swallowed. Passenger in seat 1A. Confirmed. High status. Was asked to move for another passenger. Why? Crew decision. Based on. She hesitated because saying it out loud made a real perceived priority. William's expression didn't change, but something behind it did, and the passenger they moved. She checked the tab again, as if hoping the name had changed. It hadn't. Ethan Cole. The room went quiet again. Not confused, not uncertain, just aware. That name carried weight in every room that mattered. William turned away, walked to the window, looked out over the city, Chicago waking up. Traffic building, life moving. Unaware, get me everything, he said quietly. Full report, names, actions taken, yes, and prepare termination notices. The CFO looked up. For who? William didn't turn back. For whoever made that decision. No hesitation, no delay, because at this level, mistakes weren't just mistakes. They were liabilities. Back in London, the terminal was busy, efficient, controlled chaos. Richard moved through it quickly. Priority line, fast track, everything working the way it always had, until it didn't. His phone buzzed again. Another message, this time from his assistant. Urgent. He opened it. We need to talk before your meeting. He frowned, typed back, in transit. Call later. The reply came instantly. Now. That wasn't her usual tone. He stepped aside, found a quiet corner near a glass wall, answered. What is it? Her voice came through, tight. Richard, the Meridian situation is affecting us. He closed his eyes for a second. How? The Atlas deal. A pause, then slower. They pulled out. He opened his eyes. What? The lease. New Jersey. They're not signing. The words landed heavier than anything he had read that morning. That deal wasn't optional. It was necessary. Without it, the numbers didn't hold. Without it, timelines collapsed. That doesn't make sense, he said. It does if you connect it. Silence. Then she said it. They're the same company. He didn't respond. Didn't need to. The connection was clear now. Too clear. The plane, the seat, the man. Ethan Cole. His grip tightened again. This time, harder. You're saying, he began slowly, that the person from last night, yes. Silence filled the line. Then, your meeting today. What about it? It's with Atlas. The words hit. Clean, final, not loud, but absolute. Richard looked out through the glass. Planes moving, people walking, everything normal. Except it wasn't, because suddenly the world had shifted. And for the first time in a long time, he was not in control. The car ride into the city felt longer than it should have. London moved past the window in gray tones. Wet pavement, reflections of morning light, traffic steady, predictable. Inside the car, Richard Sterling sat rigid, phone in his hand, screen dark now. He wasn't reading anymore. He was thinking, replaying every word from the night before, every look, every decision. And for the first time, something didn't sit right. Not guilt, not yet. Something closer to unease. His driver glanced at him once through the rearview mirror.
Everything all right, sir?
Richard didn't answer immediately. Then, without looking up, just drive. The car turned onto a wider avenue. Glass towers rose ahead, sharp, cold, precise. Atlas Dynamics European headquarters stood among them. Steel and glass, minimal, no wasted design, like everything Ethan Cole built. Richard had been here before. Different meetings, different context. Back then he had walked in certain confident. Today felt different. The car slowed, stopped. The driver stepped out, opened the door. Here we are. Richard stepped onto the curb, adjusted his jacket, straightened his posture. Control, always control. Inside the building, the air felt cooler, quieter. Reception was sleek, efficient. A woman in her 40s looked up from behind the desk.
Good morning.
Richard Sterling, he said. I have a meeting. She typed quickly, checked the screen, then looked up. Her expression was polite, but not warm. Please take a seat. Someone will be with you shortly. No priority escort, no immediate access. That was new. Richard nodded once, walked to the seating area, sat around him. The space was silent. Not empty, just controlled. A man in a dark suit crossed the lobby, badge clipped to his belt, speaking quietly into a headset. Two others moved past with tablets in hand. Focused, purposeful. No one looked at Richard. No one recognized him. Or if they did, it didn't matter. He checked his watch. 5 minutes, then 10, then 15. His legs shifted slightly. Not obvious. but restless. The receptionist glanced toward him once, then back to her screen. Finally, a door opened. A man stepped out, mid-40s, tall, composed. "Mr. Sterling," he said. Richard stood. "Daniel Reeves," the man added, extending a hand. "Chief Strategy Officer." The handshake was firm, brief, no small talk. "Right this way." They walked down a long corridor. Glass walls on one side, city on the other. London stretched out below, gray and vast. Inside, everything felt precise, controlled, like nothing here happened by accident. They entered a conference room. Large, minimal. One long table, screens mounted along the far wall. No clutter, no distractions. Daniel gestured to a chair. "Please." Richard sat, placed his phone on the table, face down. Daniel remained standing, hands loosely at his sides. "We'll begin shortly," he said. Richard nodded, waited. The silence returned. He didn't like it. "Not here, not now." Finally, he spoke. "I assume this is about the New Jersey facility." Daniel looked at him, calm. "Yes." Richard leaned forward slightly. "We've spent months on this," he said. "Design, planning, integration. Everything aligns with your expansion." Daniel didn't respond, didn't interrupt, just listened. Richard continued. "The location is optimal. The infrastructure is ready. We can move fast." Still nothing. The silence stretched again. Then Daniel said, "We're aware of the details. Flat, controlled, no engagement." Richard's jaw tightened slightly. Something was off. Not just the delay, not just the tone, the entire atmosphere. Like a conversation that had already been decided. "Is there an issue?" Richard asked. Daniel glanced toward the screen, then back at him. "There have been developments." That was it. No explanation, no detail. Just that. Richard leaned back, exhaled slowly. "What kind of developments?" Daniel didn't answer right away. Instead, he walked to the side of the room, pressed a button on a control panel. The large screen flickered, came to life. A video connection. Richard's attention shifted, focused, expecting another executive, another negotiation, another discussion. The screen stabilized. And then he froze for just a second. But it was enough, because sitting on the screen in a quiet office with a skyline behind him was a man he recognized instantly. Black shirt, calm eyes, still. Ethan Cole, the same man from the plane, the same man he had dismissed, the same man he had spoken around. Not to. The air in the room changed. Completely. Richard's body didn't move, but everything inside him did. His mind tried to catch up, recalculate, reframe. "You," he said. The word slipped out. Uncontrolled. Ethan didn't react, didn't smile, didn't lean forward. He just looked at him, the same way he had the night before. Calm, unshaken. "I believe we met," Ethan said. His voice was quiet, but it carried. Clear, precise. Richard swallowed, his throat suddenly dry. "I didn't realize." Ethan raised a hand slightly, not aggressive, just enough to stop him. "That's clear." Silence, heavy, unavoidable. Richard's eyes flicked to Daniel, then back to the screen. Everything aligned now. The contract, the cancellation, the timing, the meeting. It wasn't coincidence, it was consequence. Ethan leaned back slightly in his chair, unhurried, unbothered. "Let's be direct," he said. "Yes," Richard replied quickly, too quickly. A crack in the control. Ethan's gaze didn't change. "Last night," he said, "you asked me to know my place." The words landed harder here, in this room, in this context. Richard opened his mouth, closed it, tried again. That was a misunderstanding. Ethan tilted his head slightly. Was it? A question, but not really. Richard leaned forward now, hands on the table. "I didn't know who you were." There it was, the truth, unfiltered, uncomfortable. Ethan's eyes held his. "That's the point." Silence, again. But this time it cut deeper, because there was nothing left to argue, nothing left to hide behind, just the reality of what had happened and what it meant. Outside, the city moved. Cars, people, life. Inside the room, everything had stopped. Because for the first time, Richard Sterling understood exactly who he had been speaking to. And more importantly, what it was going to cost him. Richard Sterling felt the room closing in without anything physically moving. No one raised their voice. No one rushed. But the pressure was there. Heavy, precise, unavoidable. I didn't know who you were, he repeated, slower this time, as if saying it differently might fix something. Ethan Cole didn't blink. And if you had? Ethan asked. The question came clean. No edge, no emotion, just truth waiting to be acknowledged. Richard hesitated, and in that hesitation, the answer showed itself. Ethan nodded once. Exactly. The word landed like a quiet verdict. Richard leaned forward, palms pressing lightly against the table. Look, he said, voice lower now, controlled but strained. We've both been in business long enough to know how these situations happen. People make assumptions. Mistakes get made. We correct them and move forward. He spoke faster now, trying to regain ground, trying to shift the frame. This deal benefits both sides. You know that. The New Jersey site is exactly what you need for your expansion. Ethan listened, still, uninterrupted. When Richard finished, the silence came back, and this time it stayed longer. Because nothing Richard said had touched the real issue. You're talking about a contract, Ethan said finally. Yes, I'm talking about a pattern. Richard's jaw tightened. That's not fair. Ethan leaned forward slightly. Not aggressive, but engaged. It's accurate. The words didn't rise. They didn't need to. Richard exhaled sharply. You're going to walk away from a deal this size over one incident. Ethan held his gaze. No, a beat. I'm walking away because that incident revealed something. The room felt colder. Daniel Reeves, standing off to the side, shifted his weight slightly, watching, listening, understanding exactly where this was going. Richard shook his head once. This isn't personal, he said. Ethan's eyes didn't move. It is, he replied, simple, direct, and completely unarguable. Richard sat back. For the first time, the control slipped just enough to show, not panic, but something close. What do you want? He asked. There it was, the pivot, from confidence to negotiation.
From certainty to asking.
Ethan didn't answer immediately. He looked at Richard, really looked at him. Not the suit, not the watch, the man, the posture, the habits, the patterns. Then he said, I want accountability. Richard nodded quickly. Fine, we can address that. I'll speak to the airline personally. I'll make sure. Ethan raised his hand again, stopping him.
That's not your decision to make.
Richard stopped mid-sentence because that was the truth, and he knew it. Ethan leaned back slightly. His tone didn't change. I'm not interested in apologies made after the fact, he said. I'm interested in systems that don't allow that decision to happen in the first place. Richard's brow furrowed. That's bigger than this deal. Yes. The word came without hesitation, because it was, and that was the difference. Richard had seen a moment. Ethan had seen a structure. And once you see the structure, you can't ignore it. You're making this into something it doesn't have to be, Richard said, voice tightening again. Ethan shook his head once. No, I'm recognizing what it already is. Silence. Again, but now it felt final. Like a door closing slowly. Richard felt it. He shifted in his chair, leaning forward again, trying one more time. Ethan, he said, using his name now, more carefully, we've both built things. We both understand how fragile momentum can be. This project matters, to my company, to yours. Walking away hurts both sides. Ethan's expression didn't change, not equally. The words landed flat.
Because they were true.
Richard opened his mouth, then stopped. Because he had no answer, Ethan continued. You'll lose a tenant, he said. I'll find another facility. Another pause. Your company is leveraged against that project. Mine isn't. Richard's face shifted, just slightly, but enough. Because now it was no longer about perception. It was about reality, numbers, exposure, risk, things that didn't bend. How do you know that? Richard asked quietly. Ethan's gaze stayed steady. I do my homework. The room held still, because that answer meant more than it said. It meant this wasn't reaction. This wasn't emotion. This was strategy. Already in motion, already ahead. Richard felt it then, not as a thought, as a weight, dropping, slow, heavy. You're pulling out, he said. Not a question. A realization. Yes. No hesitation. No negotiation.
Just final.
Richard leaned back slowly. The chair creaked softly under the shift. For a moment, he said nothing. Because there was nothing left to say that would change the outcome. And he knew it. Ethan watched him. Not with satisfaction. not with anger, with clarity. Because this wasn't about winning. It was about consequence. You told me to know my place, Ethan said. The words came back, words Abba, full circle. Richard's eyes flicked up, met his. Ethan's voice stayed calm. My place is to decide who I do business with, a beat, and who I don't. The room went quiet again, but this time it wasn't tense, it was settled, because the decision had already been made. Daniel stepped forward slightly, subtle, professional. The meeting is concluded, he said, not rude, not abrupt, just final. Richard didn't move right away. He sat there, processing, not the loss of the deal, but the chain reaction, the airline, the contract, now this, all connected, all triggered by one moment, one decision, one assumption. He stood slowly, adjusted his jacket, the motion automatic, a habit built over years, even when everything underneath it was shifting. He looked at Ethan one last time. There were things he could say, apologies, explanations, but none of them would land because they were late, too late. So he said nothing, turned, walked toward the door, each step measured, controlled, but heavier now. Because for the first time in a long time, he wasn't walking away from a situation he controlled. He was walking out of one where the outcome had already been decided. Behind him, the screen went dark. Ethan remained seated, still calm. The storm had already passed for him, but for everyone else involved, it was just beginning. The news did not slow down. It spread, quiet at first, then faster, then everywhere. By mid-morning, every major financial network had the story running across the bottom of their screens. Clean text, red indicators. Numbers falling. Meridian Airways down 14% at open. Analysts speaking in careful tones. Words like exposure, risk, leadership failure. At headquarters, the pressure had turned into something else. Not panic. Movement, fast, precise, unforgiving. William Carter stood in the main conference room now, not behind a desk, not protected, standing, hands on the table, eyes moving from one executive to the next. I want names, he said. No one spoke immediately. Because everyone in that room already knew. They just didn't want to say it. Finally, the operations director slid a printed report across the table. 2 names, Cynthia Maddox, Daniel Hayes, gate agent, supervisor. William looked down, read them once, then again, slow, careful, as if giving the moment weight. What exactly did they do? He asked. The legal advisor stepped forward, voice measured. They manually reassigned a confirmed first-class passenger to accommodate another traveler. The justification entered into the system does not match flight data. William's eyes lifted. Meaning, it was false. The word landed hard. No way around it. No spin. No defense. They created a reason, the lawyer continued, to justify a decision that violated company policy. William nodded once. Small, controlled, and the passenger they moved. The CFO answered this time, Ethan Cole. The room held still, again, because the name carried more weight now than it had an hour ago. Because now they understood what they had touched. Will Swim straightened, looked at the clock, then back at the room. Terminate them, he said. No hesitation, no discussion, effective immediately. The operations director nodded. Already moving, already sending messages, already setting the process in motion. Because at this level, decisions didn't wait, they landed, and then they moved. What about public response? The communications head asked. William exhaled slowly. We acknowledge the incident, he said. We accept responsibility. We commit to review. The words sounded right, but they felt small, even in the room. Because everyone there knew this was bigger than a statement. This was structural. And structures don't change overnight. Across the city, in a small break room at JFK, Cynthia Maddox sat alone. Her uniform still on, but her posture different, not sharp. Not composed, folded in slightly, like something had shifted inside her. The television mounted in the corner played the news on low volume. Red ticker moving, numbers dropping. She wasn't watching, not really. She was staring at her hands, still, quiet. The memory replayed again, Ethan's face, his voice calm, not angry. That was what stayed with her, not the argument, not the tension, the calm. She had expected resistance, frustration, something she could push back against. But there was none, just certainty.
And now this.
The door opened. She looked up. Daniel Hayes stepped in, his tie loosened, face pale. He didn't say anything at first, just walked to the vending machine. Pressed a button, waited. The machine hummed, dropped a bottle. He didn't pick it up right away, just stood there. Then finally turned. "You see this?" he asked. Cynthia nodded slightly. He let out a short breath. "500 million," he said. The number felt unreal, too big, too distant. But it wasn't. Not anymore. Cynthia swallowed. "I didn't know," she said. Her voice was quieter than she expected. Daniel looked at her, not angry, not defensive, just tired. "Yeah," he said, a pause. "Then, that's the problem." He walked over, sat across from her. The space between them felt heavier than the room itself. "I've been doing this job 15 years, he said. "You learn to read people. Fast. You have to." Cynthia nodded. She understood that. That was what she had believed. That was what she had relied on. He didn't look like Daniel started, then stopped, because finishing that sentence would make it real, would make it clear. Cynthia looked down again. "He didn't look like what?" she asked softly. Daniel didn't answer, because they both knew, and saying it out loud wouldn't fix anything. The television volume rose slightly as the segment shifted. A commentator speaking now, measured tone. Sources indicate the decision may have involved discriminatory judgment during boarding procedures. Cynthia's chest tightened. She reached for the remote, muted it. Too late. The word was already there, hanging, unavoidable.
I wasn't trying to.
She started, then stopped, because intent didn't matter now. Outcome did. Daniel leaned back, stared at the ceiling. "They're going to fire us," he said. Flat, no drama, just fact. Cynthia didn't respond, because she knew. They both knew. Not because the company cared about the incident, but because they had become the liability, the visible part of a much larger failure. Footsteps approached in the hallway, slow, deliberate. Cynthia's shoulders tensed. The door opened again. This time, it was not a colleague. Two people, corporate, clean suits, neutral expressions, the kind of faces that don't carry emotion into a room. "Cynthia Maddox," one of them said. Her name sounded different coming from them. Official, final. She stood, slowly. "Yes, please come with us." No explanation, no discussion. Daniel didn't move.
Didn't speak.
He just watched, because his turn was next. Cynthia picked up her bag. Her hands felt heavier, not shaking, just waited. She walked past Daniel. Their eyes met for a second. No words, because there were none that mattered anymore. In the hallway, the world felt sharper, brighter, colder. The corporate office doors ahead looked the same as they always had. But today, they felt like something else, a line, one she was about to cross. And behind her, somewhere far beyond this building, beyond this city, beyond the system that had made that moment feel normal, a different kind of balance was being restored. Not loud, not dramatic, but real. Because sometimes the cost of a single decision isn't measured in the moment it happens. It's measured in everything that follows. Richard Sterling walked out of the building slower than he had walked in. Same doors, same lobby, same city outside. But everything felt different. The glass reflected him as he passed. Suit still perfect, shoulders still straight. But the expression had changed. Not broken, not yet, but no longer certain. Outside, the air was cold, damp from earlier rain. London moving like it always did. Cars flowing, people passing, no one noticing. He stopped on the sidewalk. Just for a second, his phone buzzed again. He didn't want to look, but he did. More alerts. More messages, one from his assistant, urgent. He opened it. Banks are requesting updates on the New Jersey project. His jaw tightened. Another message, investor call move forward. Another. Media asking for comment. The pressure was stacking, layer by layer, fast. He stepped toward the waiting car. The driver opened the door.
"Back to the hotel, sir?"
Richard paused, then nodded. Yes. Inside the car, silence returned. Heavy, uncomfortable. He stared at the city through the window. But he wasn't seeing it. He was running numbers, timelines, worst-case scenarios. The New Jersey project was not just another deal. It was leveraged, deep, tied to multiple lines of credit, structured around one assumption, that Atlas Dynamics would anchor it. Without that, everything shifted. The model didn't hold. The margins collapsed. The risk multiplied. He leaned back, closed his eyes for a moment, and for the first time the memory came back clearly. Not the argument, not the tension, just one moment. Ethan standing in the aisle, calm, still, looking at him, not angry, not defensive, certain. Richard exhaled slowly, opened his eyes. Too late now. At Meridian headquarters, the damage was spreading. Faster than expected. Phones didn't stop ringing. Investors weren't asking questions anymore. They were making decisions, pulling back, reevaluating, protecting themselves. William Carter stood in his office again. The same space. But it no longer felt controlled. The CFO stood across from him, tablet in hand, face tight. Stock is down 18%, he said. William didn't react immediately. Trading halt? Possible if it continues. A pause. Then, other clients are delaying renewals. There it was. The second wave. Not just the loss, the ripple. The signal sent to the rest of the market. If Atlas walked away, others would think twice. William walked to the window, looked out. Chicago stretched below. Familiar, stable. But right now, that stability felt thin. How many contracts at risk, he asked. The CFO hesitated. Too early to quantify. Which meant a lot. William nodded once. Small, controlled employees. Terminated. Good, the word came flat. Not emotional, just necessary. But even as he said it, he knew it wasn't enough. It would never be enough because this wasn't about two employees. It was about what allowed that decision to feel normal. What allowed it to happen without hesitation. He turned back. What are we doing about internal review? The operations director stepped forward. Full audit initiated. Training protocols under review. William nodded again. But his eyes said something else. Too late. At JFK, Cynthia Maddox sat in a small office. The same uniform. But now it felt like something she no longer owned. The corporate representative across from her spoke in a calm, measured tone. Effective immediately, your employment with Meridian Airways is terminated. The words were expected, but hearing them still landed.
Heavy.
Final. Cynthia nodded slowly. I understand. Her voice was quiet, not defensive, not emotional, just quiet. The representative slid a document across the table. Please sign here to acknowledge receipt. Cynthia looked at the paper. The words blurred slightly, not from tears, from the weight of the moment. She picked up the pen, signed, slow, careful, as if the act itself mattered. As if doing it properly would somehow change something. It didn't. She set the pen down. The representative nodded. You'll be escorted to collect your belongings. Cynthia stood, her movement slower now. Not because she was unsure, because everything felt heavier. In the hallway, people moved as they always had. But now she noticed things differently. The looks, the quick glances. The way people measured each other, categorized, assumed. It had always been there. She just hadn't seen it, not clearly, not until now. Back in London, Richard sat in the hotel room. Laptop open, numbers on the screen. They didn't lie, they didn't soften. Without the Atlas lease, the projected revenue gap was massive. He picked up the phone, dialed, the call connected. Tell me we have options, he said. On the other end, his financial officer didn't answer immediately. Then, carefully, we're looking, which meant they didn't. Not good ones, not fast ones. How long before this becomes critical? Richard asked. A pause. Then 30 days. The number hung there, clear, unforgiving. 30 days to replace a tenant that took months to secure. 30 days to stabilize a structure built on that agreement. 30 days before lenders started moving. He leaned back. The chair creaked slightly. Find something, he said. We're trying. The call ended. The room felt quiet again. Too quiet. He looked down at his hands. Still steady, still controlled. But now, for the first time in a long time, they felt empty. Because control had slipped. Not all at once, but enough. And it had started with something small. A seat. A moment. A decision made in seconds. Based on what he thought he knew. Based on what he assumed. Outside, the city moved. Inside, the consequences settled. Slow, heavy, unavoidable. Because sometimes the cost of disrespect doesn't show up immediately. It builds quietly until one day it arrives all at once. 30 days move faster than anyone expected. They always do when pressure is real. In New York, the markets had already made their judgment. Meridian Airways never recovered its footing. The stock stabilized for a moment, then slid again. Not dramatic, not explosive, just a steady loss of confidence. Investors didn't shout. They stepped back quietly, permanently. William Carter stood in front of a boardroom table that felt longer than it used to. The chairs were filled, but the energy was different now. Less trust, less patience. The chairman spoke first. "We need to talk about leadership." William didn't interrupt, didn't defend. He had already seen this coming. The words that followed were careful, legal, measured, but the outcome was simple. He was out. No speech, no dramatic exit, just a decision. Clean, final. Across the country, Cynthia Maddox sat at a small desk in a retail store in Queens, a different uniform, a different tone. The job was simple. Returns, exchanges, complaints. People didn't look at her the way they used to. They looked through her. A man slid a crumpled receipt across the counter. "This is ridiculous," he said. "I was told this would be easy." Cynthia nodded. "I understand, sir. Let me take a look." Her voice was calm, even, controlled. But inside, something had changed. She saw it now, the way people spoke, the way they assumed, the way they decided who mattered and who didn't in the first few seconds. She processed the return, handed him his refund. "Have a good day." He didn't respond, just walked away. Cynthia watched him go, then looked down at her hands, steady, but different. Because now she understood what it felt like, not in theory, not from training, from experience. Back in Chicago, Daniel Hayes stood behind the counter of a fast food restaurant. Paper hat, name tag. The lunch rush had just started, orders coming fast, voices louder. Next, he called. A teenager stepped up, didn't look at him, just read off an order from a phone. Daniel keyed it in, hands moving automatically. Years of management replaced by repetition. A different kind of control, a different kind of responsibility. He handed over the tray. "Thank you." The kid didn't answer, just grabbed the food and walked away. Daniel exhaled slowly, not frustrated, just aware, because now he saw it too. The speed at which people judged, the ease with which they dismissed, the cost of doing that without thinking. In London, Richard Sterling sat alone in his office. The space was still impressive. Glass, steel, clean lines. But it felt emptier. The numbers on his screen didn't lie. The New Jersey project had collapsed. No replacement tenant, no extension. The lenders had moved, exactly on schedule, exactly as they had warned. He had tried everything, calls, meetings, favors. Doors that used to open didn't anymore. People who used to answer didn't return calls. Word had spread, quietly, but completely, not just about the deal. About him, about the moment, the way he handled it, the way he spoke, the way he saw people. And in business, reputation moves faster than contracts. The final notice sat on his desk. Formal, precise, default confirmed, asset seizure initiated. He read it once, then closed the folder, slow, deliberate. Across the room, the city moved like nothing had changed. But for him, everything had. Because control had never been absolute. It had just felt that way, until it wasn't. Weeks later, at a small diner in Chicago, Ethan Cole sat in a booth near the window. The place was simple. Vinyl seats, coffee strong. No one looked twice at him, and that was how he liked it. Across from him, David Carter slid a folder onto the table. "It's done," he said. Ethan glanced at it, didn't open it. "The new agreement is signed," David continued. 10 years. Full transition. Ethan nodded once. No celebration, no reaction, just acknowledgement. "And the policy," David added, tapping the folder lightly. They agreed to everything. This time, Ethan opened it. Pages clean, structured, clear. Mandatory bias training. Strict seating protection protocols. Independent review systems. Real consequences for violations. Not statements, not promises. Systems. The kind that don't rely on good intentions. The kind that hold even when no one is watching. Ethan closed the folder. Took a sip of coffee. The taste was simple, honest, Better than anything served in a first-class cabin. David leaned back slightly. You didn't have to push this far, he said. Ethan looked out the window, people walking past, ordinary lives, ordinary moments. Yes, he said quietly. I did. David studied him for a second, then nodded, because he understood. This was never about the seat, never about the argument. It was about what that moment represented, about how easily dignity can be taken, how quickly someone can be reduced to an assumption, and how rarely that gets challenged. Ethan set the cup down, steady, controlled. For every person who can push back, he said, there are thousands who can't. David didn't respond. He didn't need to, because that was the truth sitting under everything, the real weight of the story. Not the money, not the contracts, the people, the ones who get moved, dismissed, ignored, without anyone noticing. Ethan picked up his bag, stood. The diner noise continued around him, unchanged, unaware. He paused for a second, looked back at the table, then walked toward the door. No audience, no applause, just movement, quiet, decisive. Outside, the city air was cold, clear, different from that night at the airport, but the lesson remained, unchanged, because respect is not about status. It's not about appearance. It's not about what someone seems to be. It's about recognizing the person in front of you before you decide who they are. And sometimes the cost of forgetting that is everything. If this story made you stop and think, take a second to like, subscribe, and drop 3 words in the comments that stay with you. Something like respect comes first, or character over status, or actions have consequences.